Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. Today we're going to talk about a thriller that's a thriller and something quite a bit more. The title of the book is The Accident. The author, Chris Pavone. The publisher is Crown Publishers. Chris, thank you for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
It is really a thriller. The press material on the book opens this way. The editor needs it. The assistant lied about it. The Hollywood producer is desperate for it. The media mogul will kill for it. The CIA will eliminate anyone who touches it. The author will die for it. The agent is the one who controls it, but only until they find her. And all of that is about a manuscript with the title The Accident. And much of the book is taken up with that story. But it is also a book that I think takes us inside the book publishing business as it exists today. At the end of the book, in the acknowledgement part of it, you say some very interesting things in a good way. This book, you write, passed through a great many hands on its way from my keyboard to your bedside table. And they all played an important role. The book publishing world is populated with dedicated, knowledgeable, and creative people who work very hard, usually for very little pay, and almost always for absolutely no recognition whatsoever. So here's some. And then you go on to talk about the many people through whose hands your work passed before it became a bound book that you can get in bookstores. And I think that's something very important to say these days.
Thank you.
We had a man on this program some time ago, one of the first in a number of self-publishers, who claimed that was it. You know, the author does it and it's done. And then I started to ask him about, well, did anybody edit the book? Did anybody proofread it? And, of course, he went on and recited the people that he had to hire in order to get that done.
Right.
And, you know, it really still annoys me to this day to have authors thinking that way. It's terrible.
Well, there are a lot of things that need to happen to a book in order for it to become the best book that it can become, and in order for it to be launched into the world in a way that readers, the appropriate readers, will find it and come to it, and booksellers will discover it, and it will work. And it's possible, I suppose, to do all of those things in some capacity by yourself, or at least in a way that you can claim is by yourself. Hiring out people to do this, that, and the other. And some people may very well want to do that. I'm not one of those people, and I think that most people who write books are not that interested in themselves finding an editor, finding a proofreader for some types of books, finding an indexer, finding a designer, a cover designer, an interior designer, a publicist, somebody to design the marketing material, somebody to buy the paper, to source the paper somewhere, to do the printing, to figure out what the case should look like, to apply for Library of Congress cataloging and publication data, to mail 2 copies to the Library of Congress, to do all of these things that publishers do is a lot of work. And publishing houses are obviously accustomed to doing it, and they do it well, and it frees authors to not do it. And some people may want to do it, or some people may think that it is better to be in control of all of these things and get to make all of the decisions. But I don't. And I worked in book publishing houses for a couple of decades before I started writing. And I was primarily an editor, and I was surrounded by people who were very passionate about this business, which you have to be, because nobody goes into book publishing to get rich. There is no such thing as a rich book editor. or a rich book designer. It's money is not the goal of it. The passion is what brings people to the business, and what keeps people in the business. And a lot of them are very, very good at what they do, and it's difficult to be able to figure out what all of those things are that need to happen, and when they need to happen, and how they happen best and how they happen worst, and to get it done. So I'm very pleased to myself not be doing any of that except the writing part.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Good for you. But with that said, you have also said that the book is really not a book about book publishing. It is rather a book about ambition and the permanent weight of decisions made in youth and the ways we become people we didn't intend to become. And that really is the deeper story here. And it's quite interesting to me that, I don't know, sitting down and saying, I'm going to write a thriller, you were still able to develop and carry along these deeper themes.
Well, thank you. The thriller part is the veneer that I put on top of the characters and this theme of ambition, which I think is the more interesting idea, the thing that people hopefully will take away and think about. But honestly, I don't think that I am a good enough writer to be able to pull something like that off without having a very driving plot. And I love plot-heavy books sometimes, and I decided to try to combine the two things and to not have a ponderous book where nothing happens. People spend all their time thinking about their ambitions, but nor to have one long chase scene.
We'll be talking more about this non-ponderous book when we come back from these messages. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
The Accident, a very interesting novel that can be read, understand, and loved on several levels. It's written by Chris Pavone, published by Crown Books, and a woman who appeared on this program some time ago had some nice things to say about it. She's Paula McLean, author of the best-selling Paris Wife. The world of book publishing has never been more perilous or mesmerizing than in Chris Pavone's dizzyingly good follow-up to The Expats. The dark eruption of long-buried secrets, complex betrayals further snagged by sex and greed, and 11th-hour desperate gambits for reinvention all propel a whirlwind story that will keep you up way past your bedtime. And then she adds, crafty, stylish, satisfying. And it's all of that. And I think a little bit more, particularly if you, in your mind, as you go along, enjoying the trip, focus on some of the larger themes that are there beneath the story itself. Let's, though, in this segment, talk characters, because you do an awfully good job with that. And it's through the characters that you take us into the inner workings, the spirit, the problems, the struggles, the worries, the fears about book publishing as a business and as a career. The fellow that I most related to, because I've been in book publishing a long time myself, and I've known like a million editors, and I really got, into Jeffrey Fielder. Tell us about Jeffrey, who's not a success, I guess.
Jeffrey was a success. Jeffrey Fielder is a little bit younger than I am. I'm 45 years old, and Jeffrey Fielder is about how old I was when I quit being a book editor and took a job as an associate publisher, which is a job where you do a lot of business stuff. In any case, that's me. Jeffrey Fielder was one of these people who was very successful in his early 30s, as a lot of people are in book publishing. It's sort of when you first get to be making real grown-up decisions about what types of books you're going to publish and how you're going to publish them and what advances you're going to pay the authors. And he had some successes with very popular bestseller books, and he's a conspiracy theorist, and some of those books worked well. And he got promoted into a senior position, and then he got stuck there, which is not an uncommon thing. But there's sort of there's a plateau that a lot of people reach, I think, in any profession where companies are structured in a pyramid, and only a few people get to the top, and everybody else sort of reaches a certain plateau, and you need to have really stupendous successes to move beyond that. And he's become a bit disenchanted with the book business because of what's happened to him, which is not much. And he's begun to worry that his job isn't that safe, and it's not, which is a worry compounded by the fact that not only is his position not safe, but the job of editor is not that safe because the entity of book publisher is not that safe. And this is the sort of malaise that is facing a lot of people in book publishing, which is it's at a point of very unclear future. What jobs are going to exist, in what form, and will I have one?
One of the most important people in the publishing process and in the many steps involved in book publishing is a person who does not work at the book publishing house, works independently. And they are called generally agents or some other things, sometimes not so nice. And in the case of this book, it's a very wonderful agent by the name of Isabel Reed. But she, similarly to Jeffrey, has plateaued, I think. Is that right? And so that makes them kind of allies.
Yes. And she's plateaued in a slightly different way. She was faced a little earlier and a little starker than Jeffrey with the decision of whether to and to what extent to sell out. And by that I mean beginning to do your job in a way where your passion takes a back seat to the real finances of the business. And again, I think that's a fairly universal thing for people in many, many careers, that they're, again, you get to a point of responsibility where all of a sudden you realize that you are no longer beholden to simply pursuing what you want to pursue for your own interests, but that in working for a company, your job is to make that company money. And there are ways to go about that are more guaranteed than others. And Isabel went for the money, and she started publishing rather fluffy bestsellers, connecting already rich celebrities to the multinational media corporations that could make them even richer. And that's a lot of what dominates the bestseller list. There are a lot of people on bestseller lists who are not really authors, and they're celebrities of one sort or another, and they have written or to some extent been involved in the publication of a book that has their name on the cover, and they're being paid handsomely for it, and their agent is being paid handsomely for it, and the publisher is making a good amount of money on it. And she started being involved in that business. And then
everybody is very happy, but then that train stops running, not coming into the station anymore. And we'll come back and see what happens when that happens, when we return.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at JimFosterCoc, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
Chris Pavone is our guest today on Conversations on the Coast. He's talking about his new novel called The Accident. And trust me, it's a novel you don't want to miss. Published by our friends at Crown Publishers. And somebody on the front lines, a bookseller by the name of Betsy Burton, who is a bookseller at a place called the King's English, located in Salt Lake City, tells us, populated by publishers, editors, and producers, agents, journalists, and spies. The accident more than lives up to the promise of Pavone's previous page-turner, The Expats. Pavone's new book succeeds brilliantly as a mystery/thriller, fast-paced, intricate, sly, and sophisticated, and also a novel of the book industry, of corporate ambition, there's that word, corporate greed, and of the ways the past has of catching up to the present. On top of all that, it's a great read. Thank you, Betsy. You're a smart woman. The other thing that I don't think anybody said, I'm going to say it out loud and simply, the writing is fantastically good. And I would like you to share a little bit from the book with us now, if you will. And this is a very different kind of pause in the book. And it tells us about the different reaction of people leaving a funeral, the people who just came to be there for the day, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, versus the people who have had the loss, how different it is for them. Would you, Chris, please?
Yes. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Then 300 black-clad mourners streamed out of the building onto the gray, wet street, dabbing their eyes and holding hands. Some lit cigarettes, and others flung their arms in the air to hail taxis, and dozens or scores or hundreds reached into their pockets and handbags and opened cell phones and switched off silent modes and examined screens and pressed devices against ears, staring off into the low, dark sky, heads hanging at angles, listening to messages, concentrating on the details of their lives, from which they've been absent for 75 minutes, to the rescheduled appointments and updates and questions, and their eyes were still inflamed when they eased back into their normal lives, untragic lives from which their perfect little child had not been taken, unshattered lives, lives that still made sense, lives with reasons to move forward, to go to work and then to go home, to wake up the next day and do it again. But not Isabel. Everyone could see that her life no longer made sense. All those new friends she made in the playground and the preschool, all those women who spent their lives managing the trappings of their wealth, tending to their co-op lofts in Tribeca and their beach houses in Watermill and their slopeside condos in Vail, scheduling their nannies and babysitters and tutors and piano instructors and French teachers, their tailors and cleaners and manicurists and colorists and stylists, their personal trainers and Pilates sessions and yoga classes, their doormen and garage attendants, their summer and Christmas vacations, their midwinter breaks and spring breaks, their cars and boats, their silk upholstery and granite countertops and reclaimed wood floors, their this and their that, but for Isabel it just did not matter what Farrell and Ball shade of blue anyone was painting any goddamn foyer.
That says it, and that grasps beautifully the sea of difference between the principals and the come-by mourners on that kind of occasion. One of the people who's central in this book to the plot hasn't got anything to do with book publishing. In fact, at one point he goes to an agent located in Washington, D.C. and says, "Tell me about book publishing." He's a dangerous man. His name is Hayden Gray. Tell us about him.
Hayden Gray was a very, very minor character in my first book, which was called The Expats. And Hayden is a career CIA operative who went to Harvard and immediately entered the Foreign Service and then the CIA, all of it in Europe. And he has never, as an adult, lived in America. And he is sort of made, as a lot of people in this book do, they're sort of forced to examine the decisions they made when they were very young. And he decided to do this thing, and he has been doing it his whole life. And part of what I wanted to examine here is that most of us decide what we're going to do with our careers when we are very, very young and very ill-informed, and then we never really reconsider it again until some type of midlife crisis, by which point it's probably difficult to impossible to really do anything about it. And here is a guy who has found himself living in Europe and for a while now Germany, not necessarily intentionally for his whole life, and he likes that aspect of it, but he also doesn't like some of the things that he's needed to do to stay in this world that he inhabits and to do the things he's supposed to do.
And I think that he would like to get out, but at this point, as you were just saying, he can't. There really isn't a road out.
Right.
Not a road out. There's a very, very minor character that I thought you captured really well. Going back to the publishing business, a gentleman by the name of Chester Dumont, a fact checker.
Yes.
Tell us about. I mean, Chester, you must have known many Chesters in your time in book publishing.
I did know many Chesters, and in fact, to some extent, I was a Chester.
Ah.
Chester is the copy chief at this mid-sized independent book publishing company, and I began in my book career as a copy editor at Doubleday in the early 1990s. And I spent a lot. My desk did not have a computer. People didn't have computers. My room was filled with reference books, encyclopedias, books about chairs, books of foreign languages, boxes of maps, everything.
Oh, my gosh.
And I spent a lot of my life looking things up.
Well, your life right now is writing books and then going on the road to talk to people about them and sell them. And due to the magic of recording, we're broadcasting this on the day that you're in San Francisco at Book Passage, and they promised me that if people hear this program, they can head right over there and they'll find an autographed copy of your latest book, The Accident. You're Chris Pavone. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.